much further with my work, and she said Europe represented the ideal point from which to launch their new political spiritual entity, that it was eminently qualified. She quoted a man called Johannes Kanye. That was my first war. I started speaking against it, making presentations, trying to get the attention of anybody I could, largely unsuccessfully. We formed our own little group in Detroit. The priest that was interested had the idea that he could organize talks. He collaborated with my law partner who thought I was spending too much time on it. He was right. And that instead of seminars for each and every client, we could invite people on Saturday afternoons to have coffee and cookies and meet in the library of their particular school. And so we did. We kind of had our own ecumenical group going. We had, you name it, we had Seventh-day Adventists, Baptists, Church of the Nazarene, Catholics, Episcopalians, everybody concerned about what I was showing them evidence-wise. And it stayed at probably about 35 people coming per average. People would come, and the same people would come back every time. And the priest of the parish walked in one day, the senior priest, and he said, "I'm going to have to check this out." And he said, "You talk to them for 5 hours, they sit on the edge of their seats. I talk to them for 20 minutes and they fall asleep." November 4th, 1981, I heard a very interesting man speak in Detroit. And I'll tell you how this came about. One day I went into that Mayflower bookstore, and I spotted a book called The Reappearance of the Christ by Benjamin Creme. And I bought it. Didn't think that much about it at the time. I had so many crazy books with similar themes. And the attorneys that I shared space with in downtown Detroit said, "Maybe you would like to use our computers to catalog these." I had the first Wang dedicated word processor in the office, but they had a TRS Model 3. And they said, "You're welcome to use our computer and get your own software, but you can use our computer," which I did. And the computer I used was Anita Baker's computer, the singer. She was a secretary for our office back in those days. And I was sitting at Anita Baker's computer, and I was trying to synthesize. Back in those days, the databases were very limited. You could use about maybe 50 words to describe something. So I looked through Benjamin Creme's book, and he had a section, How the Plan is Working Out. And he talked about all the political developments that were going on that they were working with. And I had suspected as much, but he was making some claims and making some fairly impressive statements. And I wrote, you have to see this one for yourself to believe it. And I carried that book then with me night and day. Went to court for a client in St. Clair Shores. I stopped at the Big Boy for breakfast. And went to court and left court. And I discovered that book was missing. Now, it wasn't the kind of book that you get on the phone, you say, "Hello, my name is Constance Cumbey. I'm an attorney. I left my copy of The Reappearance of the Christ by Benjamin Creme at your restaurant or at your courtroom." I was kind of hoping the janitor would just quietly throw it in the wastebasket and never say another word to anybody. I've represented folks on the mental health docket that were locked up for a lot less than that. But I had to have that book. And so that night, I closed up shop early. I ran down to the Mayflower before closing time. And John Barneswell, the assistant manager who had sold me the first materials, the one I had encountered the first day, I said, "Do you have The Reappearance of the Christ by Benjamin Creme?" He said, "Nope, Constance, sorry, we're all sold out." They were well familiar with what my work was at that point. And then he handed me a flyer. He said, "But here, Unity's bringing him to town. You can hear him in person." And that flyer, the text of it is reproduced in my first book, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, and a true copy is reproduced in the second book of Planned Deception. And I just stared at that thing. I said, this guy's no Christ, that's for sure. But if Unity is trying to pass this on, and they were very politically powerful in Detroit, I said, something's happening. And so I made plans to attend, and I took about 8 Christian spies with me, a couple of big ones. And I didn't want to be alone with that crowd. And it was an interesting evening, to put it mildly. I walked in, there were about 1,300 people in the hall. Hall seat of 1,300, every seat was taken, and there were a lot of people standing besides. And I was stunned at the makeup of the hall. There was a former head of the Detroit Council of Churches who I knew from Detroit political circles. The entire Holistic Health Medical Association was sitting there very attentively, and their publicity director was acting as master of ceremonies for the evening, Dan Butts. And saw lots of prominent people in the crowd, and I saw people that had been friends. I saw a former law partner sitting across the room, and my accountant was in the room. I turned to a fellow behind me who was an independent movie producer and I said, Al, I know what I'm doing here tonight. What are you doing here? He said, because, Connie, he said, I'm taking a course in miracles at Unity. He said, we are required to take a spiritual growth class when we join Unity. And I'm taking a course in miracles, and it's a class requirement that we attend. And I gave him a quick synopsized version of my objections to what was taking place that night, and he thanked me. And then Benjamin Krem walked in, and he did something with his hands. I don't know how to replicate it. It was like a wave. It looked something like that. And simultaneously, about everybody in the room but myself and my spies appeared to go into a very deep, instantaneous trance. And Benjamin Krem got up. He twisted his neck around it was as close to a 360-degree turn of a neck as I've ever seen. Normally, I can stare about anybody down. I did not want to try. His eyes were abnormally bright. I attributed it to the very expensive sodium lighting they had for the video series they were obviously attempting to make. I coughed. I did everything I could to try to break the spell on people, rustled the papers on my lap. When they took the first break, there was a rather heavy-set woman sitting there. I tried to come through, and she put her knees out so I couldn't move. I said, excuse me. She said, that will teach you not to rustle papers when he is speaking. I'm sure under normal circumstances she would not have dreamed of that type of social behavior. Well, Benjamin Krem had announced that after the break they should regather and they would do a mass recitation of the Great Invocation. This is the prayer by Alice Bailey, from the point of light within the mind of God, may light stream forth, so on and so forth. It literally is a prayer